trying this trade with the 1 minute fair value gap into the silver bullet session. See if it goes down to the target of the lows down here. This is the target. Here's the fair value gap on the 1 minute chart. We just entered in the silver bullet
Where did you
moment.
mark that, Diego? I don't think that's a valid SD.
I'm going to see if I can let that ride down. I like to drag my stop pretty close though. This will give me a test to see if I can hold this or just close it for the profit. I'm closing it. Unfortunately, I got to get better at holding. It's seeing now it goes right down. So that was a good idea. I like the setup. I did the setup right. I did the timing right. I saw the fair value gap. It didn't come down so far before the silver bullet moment that
Discord
there's
fucked him
no
a few times. Switched his screen to his account. Lol. Only time I've seen him.
that there's no room for it to go down. So I like all the things here that we're looking at. I got in when the green candle closed and the red candle started to form. As soon as it started to go and I saw a double peak, I said I'll use the double peak as my stop loss. So if this red candle had popped up over the top of these two wicks, I would have stopped out. That's how tight my stop was. Okay, target is down here, but I got out too early. All right, so that's the flaw that I made on this trade. This is my fourth trade of the day. I'm sort of experimenting with things, trade 4. But silver bullet is something that I definitely want to get better at and understand a whole lot more. I think there's something to it. I really do. So there we go. That's my silver bullet morning trade so far. We'll see if we get any more or not. And we'll see if I took profits at the right time too, because if it goes over the top of these two wicks here, but there is another silver bullet area up here. But this is if I think that it's going to go to the 60-minute. Here we go. We had this big morning session where it popped up over the daily highs and all-time highs, I think, on this particular futures. And then it came down, slamming down. And the target that it might want to sweep is way down here. But it looks like this was a sweep of these lows, so I'm not sure. It went over the top of this area here, so that objective is over. It went over the top of all-time highs, so that's been taken care of. And the only other thing left to do is either go back up to that area or come down to this area here. So I really don't know. So we had to keep our stops very tight on the trades that we take. And we have to be very, very, and I see I would have been stopped out. So I probably would have broke even on this trade if I didn't take my profits down here, and that's okay. I got to get better at holding, but on a day when it can go in either direction, we got to be really careful. So I'd rather be careful than not. So let's keep an eye on what's going on with this, but that was my silver bullet trade for the AM session. So, okay, where are we at now with the silver bullet? We took that trade up at the top and it worked pretty good. It got out and price came right back up here and rolled down again. I almost took the trade in a 15-second chart. It came up to this fair value gap here, but it's at the bottom of it. It wasn't in the middle. I didn't really want to take it here at the very bottom on a big fair value gap like that. But there has been some pretty good tries. Here's another area. And it was a great opportunity right here on, sometimes the fair value gap gets pierced pretty high and that's very difficult to trade, like this one right here.
Let's go, Murphy.
This one right here came up way too high for an entry. Okay, this one's been completely ignored on the 1 minute chart. This one on the 1 minute chart did pretty good. It never closed above it right here. There's a fair value gap created right there in that space. The price came up, pierced the top of it, but never closed above it. And it came shooting straight down. Very nice. Let's see what that looks like on the... Yeah, that's the same area right over here. Very nice. All right, Friday the 23rd, February 2024. We're about to wrap up the AM session of the Silver Bullet time-sensitive trade setup. Our draw on liquidity was down, so we are looking for setups to take us to that target. And we got the 5 minute mostly, and the 1 minute, and then the 15-second chart, which really gives us a lot of good insights on trade opportunities. I did take that one trade, and it worked out. I got out before it came back up and stopped me out, which is great. I took it because the draw on liquidity was down as soon as the silver bullet time began here at 10 a.m. in the morning, Eastern New York City time. Price had immediately came up into this fair value gap, and we shorted using the double wick as our stop loss, and it went right down, and I just stopped out because I made a 2-to-1 on that, 3-to-1 on that. I was trying to hold it longer, but price started to come back up, so I just wanted to close, and I'm glad I did because I would have been stopped out. And what other opportunities here do we have? Well, what time chart is this? This is the 1 minute time chart here. Let's take a look just based on the 1 minute alone. Order blocks, 50% retracements, and fair value gaps. Now, it did come up a lot higher here into this fair value gap on the 1 minute chart, but I got to figure out my entry strategies a little bit better. Maybe I could set it up to where I'm entering in at the beginning of the fair value gap and adding to it up into the high part. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet. I'm still learning. Here's the fair value gap where price came up, did not close above it, but pierced above it and then whipped down pretty good. Here's the fair value gap right here where price had shot up. And when I started seeing this kind of behavior, it was really, I start putting caution because the fair value gaps have been ignored, although this could have been an order block area where price had come up and tried to push up above that, and it failed. We're getting a couple of patterns here that look like order blocks, where pattern is trying to sell off here in this area right here, and that is where it held up here. Here's a small, tiny little fair value gap right here on this candle going on in this. When this thing came down, it created a fair value gap right there, and one right underneath that. So both candles actually created fair value gaps. So you could see, of course, the first one did not work. And so we're seeing this violation of fair value gaps, and even the upper one that did work, it got violated and surpassed on this run up here. So we have a couple fair value gaps on the downside over here. Well, we got the one right here that we're finishing off right now that did pretty nicely, and this is the last couple of minutes here of our Silver Bullet AM session today, and it did head towards the objective. And if we have the objective right and we can find entries to get in, I love the Silver Bullet strategy. Looking forward to trading the PM session today. But the reason why we wanted to go short was we saw that the objective to hit the all-time highs here was met on the daily chart, and then we went to the 60-minute chart to see what kind of sweeps could be taking place, and it looks like this pivot that was created is an area that it wants to come to at the very minimum. And there's all kinds of areas down below that it can hit after that, but at least that. So we are bearish up to this point right here. All right, and so when we enter into the Silver Bullet time zone here, we're just simply looking for bearish entry points using PD arrays and ICT entry signals and trade setups. Mostly the fair value gap and order blocks for me is my favorite ways to enter into a trade. And I'm just studying price action. Which ones worked, which ones didn't work, which ones kind of worked, and trying to get familiar with studying price action. Now here's the 15-second chart. Here's the one that I took right here that did work, and I got out before it came back up, and we're just studying more and more the areas and what happened. You know, there's some fair value gaps here. Let me turn that off. There's some fair value gaps on the downside here that price came down to the very bottom right here. This little order block right here was respected, at least temporarily, right? And then it starts chopping around in that area, which makes me really question and be more careful. Here's a little area that had a fair value gap that was disrespected, but then it came down and then passed it and then held up in that area the second time it came to it, which is interesting. Like this fair value gap right here was not respected, but then it became respected, and then it just continued to make lower and lower highs. Again, this fair value gap was respected, and then it came up higher than this and still respected it. Here's a fair value gap that was respected before going into the end of our Silver Bullet session, which we're now done with. So we're just observing this. This is a really good data study, really good, successful, positive day that worked profitably, and it could have been better, but just to watch price action, to understand the daily bias direction, to understand why we think it's going to go lower, putting it all together and then watching it unfold on the screen, watching entry points set up, taking advantage of them, and then continuing to observe them as they develop throughout the rest of the session is very, very rewarding. And hopefully we'll get better and better at this as time goes on, Lord willing.